March 6, 1945. In the ruins of Cologne, Oberleutnant Wilhelm Bartelbohr stood in his Panther tank, surveying the approaching storm. Through his periscope, he counted the enemy Sherman tanks, columns of them, rolling through the shattered city streets. 12, 20, and still more emerging from the smoke. It was not an attack. It was a procession. The scale was overwhelming. Around him, the remnants of Panzer Brigade 106 sat lifeless, not because they were destroyed, but because they had no fuel. 17 Panthers, 9 Panzer IVs, 38 half-tracks, now just armored tombs. In the morning haze, Bartelbohr could see American tanks massed in the open. They hadn't even bothered to camouflage. Crews brewed coffee, mechanics tightened bolts. It was like a motor pool on a Sunday morning, not a battlefield. The Americans had lost 23 Shermans that morning. Yet the advance continued, unaffected. Bartelbohr's adjutant, Zimmerman, scanned the horizon with captured binoculars and counted 217 enemy tanks in just one sector. The Americans weren't fighting a war. They were performing logistics. Germany had started the offensive with 89 tanks. After 3 months, 26 remained. The Americans had more vehicles in 1 square kilometer than the entire 5th Panzer Army had received in 6 months of replacements. Back in November 1944, Albert Speer, Hitler's armaments minister, had delivered a report that should have ended all hopes. German tank production had peaked at 1,800 in a single month. The Allies were producing over 4,000 monthly. Germany was trying to fight a mechanized war with handcrafted machines. American factories operated like clockwork: stamp, weld, rivet, repeat. While German workers hand-filed parts and rebuilt wrecks, American assembly lines never stopped moving. By March 1945, the U.S. had produced 49,000 Shermans. They sent thousands to the Soviets, armed the British, and still had enough to replace every combat loss in days. Germany's elite tank crews knew the truth. Bartelbohr, veteran of Kursk and Normandy, had seen what mattered most now was not design or bravery, but numbers. 3 days before Cologne, Bartelbohr sat in Field Marshal Model's smoke-filled bunker. The outlook was grim. The enemy can lose 100 tanks Monday and field 150 Tuesday, Model told his commanders. Bartelbohr's brigade would receive just 12 replacement vehicles from March. Half were rebuilt from salvage wrecks. Desperate, he ordered his tanks dug into static positions. Mobile warfare, the very concept of Panzer doctrine, was now impossible. Meanwhile, Colonel John Smith of the U.S. 3rd Armored Division logged 35 new Shermans with 76mm guns, 12 Hellcats, and 8 Jacksons, more than they had lost the previous week. American storage areas were crowded with tanks waiting to be used. The disparity was no longer strategic. It was existential. When the Americans launched their assault on Cologne at 0800 hours, the artillery shook the ground. Bartelbohr's Panther waited in ambush. At 1450, the first Sherman appeared. A perfect shot destroyed it. But instead of retreating, the Americans pushed the burning wreck aside and pressed forward. Within minutes, 3 more Shermans were destroyed. Still they advanced, unstoppable. Then came something different, heavier, longer barrel, unfamiliar. It was the M26 Pershing, America's new heavy tank. Bartelbohr hesitated, mistaking it for a German design. That hesitation cost him everything. The Pershing, nicknamed Eagle 7, fired once, then again. His Panther was aflame. Bartelbohr and 3 crew members escaped. The gunner didn't. Across Germany, the pattern was the same. Fewer tanks, less fuel, no replacements. The Americans had adopted a different philosophy. Designed tanks for production, not perfection. The Sherman wasn't superior, but it was reliable, easy to build, and easy to replace. Germans treated tanks like Swiss watches. The Americans treated them like trucks. By late March, the imbalance was irreversible. The U.S. Ninth Army alone fielded over 1,300 tanks. The entire German Army group had fewer than 100 operational vehicles. At Paderborn, a German commander counted 400 American tanks pass a single point in 1 hour. His battalion had 6 Tiger IIs. American industrial might have become a weapon unto itself. In April, German officers reported that they couldn't stop the advance. They couldn't even be noticed. One officer watched from a church tower as Americans bypassed their position entirely. They had so many tanks, he said, they didn't bother looking for ours. In Cologne, Bartelborth's Panther sat burning as endless columns rolled past. The war was no longer about tactics. It was about arithmetic. When American forces captured a depot of 43 damaged German tanks on April 13th, they didn't bother salvaging them. A commander simply said, "We've got 200 brand new Pershings arriving next week." That same day, German crews destroyed their own vehicles for lack of fuel. Americans, by contrast, left engines running overnight just to stay warm. In the final weeks, German officers began to speak plainly. "This is industrial extermination," one said. The Germans lost 26 tanks in Cologne, every vehicle in the sector. America replaced its 31 losses within 72 hours. The math was brutal and absolute. For every tank Germany lost, it meant catastrophe. For America, it meant a delivery. By war's end, the U.S. had produced 88,000 tanks and self-propelled guns. Germany had built just a fraction of that. German tank crews reflected bitterly in prison camps. "Our tactics were excellent. Our crews were the best trained," one officer said. "None of it mattered. You built tanks like newspapers, daily in impossible numbers." Bartelborth's gunner, Gustav Schaefer, survived the war. Years later, he explained the lesson simply. Every Tiger was a masterpiece that took 6 months. Every Sherman was adequate and took 3 hours. The lesson was brutal. In industrial warfare, the nation with the most factories wins. Today, Bartelborth's Panther sits in a museum in Cologne, a magnificent machine built with precision, power, and pride. But the real story isn't in the tank, it's on the wall behind it. Germany built 6,000 Panthers. America built nearly 50,000 Shermans. And that, in the end, is why the war was lost.